Hey, how's it going? It's Harrison Burns with Grieving Teens again, and today we have a special guest who's already done an interview, but he's coming back to do another one. His name is Garrett Barden. Garrett, would you go ahead and introduce yourself? Give us your name and your occupation, just so other people can know.
All right. Well, as you know, I'm Garrett Barden, and I'm an OP 31 in the United States Marine Corps, and I'm 24 years old, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, Garrett. So today we're going to discuss how to get others to talk through grief. So this isn't necessarily a story about yourself or myself. This is about the methods that you utilize and how to get other people to discuss pain, stressful things, strife, the things they're going through. So the first question to you, though, is a little bit more personal. It's a little more personalized. It's just to get some context for you yourself. And my first question to you is, what was it that made you yourself originally open up about the things you were going through? Did you feel like you were reaching a breaking point? Were you keeping everything bottled up inside? Was it someone that saw you and said, hey, man, you need to talk about these things? What was it that made you originally decide, all right, you know what, maybe it's time?
So I was going through a lot in my life. My father was very much so absentee. Coming, as I was growing up, he just kept going further and further away, not coming home, and dealing with things back with my mother and then my brother and my sister. I've always been a peacemaker in the family and always been trying to want to talk about things, but I soon realized that I was becoming very hypocritical, that I wouldn't talk about my own grief, but I would, expect somebody to tell me about theirs. And eventually my brother and want to introduce me to Tom. And I was, realizing to myself that I should probably open up and not be such a hypocrite, see what other people are saying, and maybe talk about myself. And eventually I get to a point where I feel comfortable. So I originally was very adverse to it because, again, I'm not very talkative about my own problems. I feel that for me, I thought it was a sign of weakness to be able to do stuff like that, but, be more of a rock to somebody else. But I soon to realize that if I can't, talk about my own things, how can I want to not only relate, but expect others to do the same if I'm going to be a hypocrite on it? So I came to realize that I need to not do that and open up to experience the full picture and actually cope with it and realize, what I'm doing to help others.
Okay, Garrett. Yeah, it's a great answer, man. I saw some of that when you and I were growing up, going through high school, but
Mm-hmm.
I actually saw you mature a lot throughout that process, and so I think
Mm-hmm.
Tom really helped you along with that. My
Definitely.
next question to you is more or less about how we can get others to talk about their pain. So, what are some of the ways in which we can get other people to open up and start talking? And what are the ways in which we can be a friend to them? Because sometimes it's
So
all.
I think it's always different for every person in my experience that I've done. But the one thing that always works and everyone always has in common is one is don't initially talk about the grief. Talk about them as a person, get to know them, actually go down to earth. Don't just focus on the problem there because they're gonna lie. Like, I've had experience with that. They're all gonna say, "Oh, I don't want to bother you about it." There's gonna be stuff. No, just level it out, be cool, be there, and constantly like check in. That's I'm pretty sure you guys in the military we do buddy checks all the time because we have to deal with talking to people because it's such a stressful environment. We all have our own personal stuff going home, and the best thing that I've found works is just being there, talking slowly, uh, not saying to avoid the problem, work your way into it. It's all about trust, as we all know, and it's very hard to find that trust to confide into people because when we do things, we're very reprehensive about saying what we actually want to say and just give a little bit of a sugarcoat, so it's not that bad. So in the end, it's just about slow communication, building that work up, building that trust, and just being there. That's the biggest thing that has always worked and always will work. It's tried, it's proven. I've experienced it when it came down to talking with you, when it came to talking with Mr. Morris, and then when it came to listening to other people. When they talk about their stories and they want just somebody to talk to, just work into it, build that relationship. It's all about building relationships and being there.
So just being ever present within that person's life and just getting to know
Mm-hmm.
them at a personal level before you
Yes.
address the issues that they're facing. Yeah,
100%.
I found sometimes that works better because I find myself, it's a lot easier to discuss personal things with a friend or somebody that you
Mm-hmm.
trust rather than with a stranger. However, Some people would actually argue that the latter, that talking with a stranger, is sometimes easier because they're not as involved in your life. With
Oh,
everyone, it's very different from person to person. However, in most experiences, I would agree with what you've been saying, how you have to build a relationship and be present in somebody's life.
And that also goes with the grief group as well. Didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go for it.
But you know, when you go into a room like what we've been in when we talk for grieving teens, it can be a little jarring for most people when they go in. You know, they just want to go in. That's why it's always good to go in slow. Just be open to it. You don't have to make friends with anyone in the room. Just know that they're there to listen to you and give you advice, give you something that they might have dealt with. It's always good to hear other people's, even if it's from a stranger or a friend. It's always good to get different perspectives on topics, their grief and what they've gone through, because it allows you to evaluate your own. As a thing, you know, in the Marine Corps, we have this, you know, leadership principles of, you know yourself and seek self-improvement. That goes in all tried and true things of going talking to people, learning from them, their experience, and then looking inward on what you can focus for yourself.
Yeah, I agree. Another question is actually more on the methods, is that sometimes if you just show vulnerability to somebody and explain that, hey, I have experience, I might not know the exact situation, but I have experience in this area, and I understand what you're going through. I can't empathize with you, because personally for me, I think empathizing is almost BS. The reason for that is because you can't always place yourself precisely in exactly the way that that person is feeling or their situation. You can sympathize and you can understand the situation might be similar, but you got to understand that you can't just go in expecting that the situation for somebody is exactly the same as your own or your experience. That I feel like that's a little bit like pretentious. I feel like going in and expecting that, oh yeah, I know exactly what I'm talking about. Going in, it's a really dangerous mindset to have when you're talking with someone, especially in a delicate situation. But I think receiving outside opinion and getting people to talk about it oftentimes leads to more solutions that you might not even thought of. Some of the things that you were talking about and we're discussing right now, I haven't even considered. And like for instance, one of them that I just realized is building that friendship. Sometimes I haven't even considered that. I didn't even think about that until you actually said it, because I've always tried to be friendly and warm with people, but going further than that and actually taking it the step forward and actually being a friend to somebody, I hadn't even really thought of that. Because like building a friendship and building a relationship that's built on trust in order to get somebody to open up to you is a lot harder, and it's a lot more time consuming, and it's a lot more of a laborious process, because you're putting in yourself, your time, your energy, your effort into somebody else. But it can pay serious dividends in the long run if you play it out right.
Oh yes, and 100%. And also to reiterate what you said about vulnerability, it's a good thing. You know, that also shows trust. That, you know, there's nothing wrong with being vulnerable. It makes you human, but it makes you a somebody who you can actually really go in and sympathize. As you were talking about the difference between sympathizing and empathizing with, because we have all been in a vulnerable state. So it's a good thing. It's nothing to be scared about. It's nothing to feel ashamed for. As we all know, I've been there. You've been there. It's just one of those things that comes with learning and comes with improving upon yourself, and not letting it drag you down, thinking just because, oh, I don't want anybody to see me like this. It's something we all have to understand. It comes with the nature of stress. It comes with the nature of other topics of, you know, not profound, should we say, you know, death, or if it's, you know, stuff like that, that it just goes into darker aspects of people's life, and they don't want to see people in that state.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think sometimes it can be boiled down to the human condition. We all go through it. Everybody's got their problems, and everyone has their stressors. But yeah, I do think trust is mutual. It's a two-way street. So it's you got to give and you got to receive. It's the way it goes. If trust isn't presented or given to somebody, at least initially, to present a solution to someone's problem, they're not really going to be too keen on opening up, at least for most people. Unless it's been building for a long time, you're the first person in their entire life that's ever asked them if they're okay. In which case, you might get their entire life story spilled out on you, which has happened to me in the past.
And it's nothing wrong with that. You know, it's a relief when you actually get to tell somebody, you get this weight off your shoulders, off your heart, off your brain. You get to lay it out. You actually get to have all that pent up aggression, stress, anger, whatever the emotion you're feeling, because it goes in waves. It goes into different levels, and it goes into different feelings. And it's always good to talk about that stuff in the end, because it gives you that relief, and it gives you idea to reflect and think.
I actually have a question for you that's a little bit more
Yeah.
unique to you. And I've done it too when I was in the Marine Corps, but for
Mhm.
you, you're still in. And I want
Mhm.
to know, what are some of the methods that you used to help yourself or even others through grief in the military, like counseling other Marines and talking to some other dudes who might have had problems back home with, I don't know, their significant other or their children or friends or family members, or whether it's death in the family, money stressors, like finances, anything at all. Like, what are some of the ways in which you've helped and counseled others through grief?
So the first thing, I've gone through the whole ringer of, dealing with people on all the spectrum of what you just said, between death in the family, uh, divorce, financial struggles. And the thing that's always helped out is humor. Getting their mind off it so they can think rationally and clearly. So set a different mindset aside. Get them away from it so they don't overthink, because stress leads to overthinking, which leads to panic, which leads to depression, which leads to anger, which leads to all kinds of negative thoughts that just makes it worse. It doesn't help. So the first thing that I always did was try to get their mind off it, or if I couldn't do that, I would just slowly work my way into it. I would let them talk to me. I'd be like, hey man, is everything okay? What's wrong? Sit them down, chill, grab a beer with them, just let them talk, let them tell their stuff, and then divert away from the conversation for a bit. It doesn't always. You don't want them to focus solely on the stress. You don't want them to solely focus on the panic, the grief. You want them to divert, to build that endorphins of either humor, build a different mindset for them. It clears the thoughts. It helps. So one of the things, I had a buddy, we would either just, sit back, watch funny YouTube videos, tell jokes, tell them about some of the the miserable times, we should say, in the fields. Not just brought up different memories. As much as it sucked, it was funny. I had a buddy. We were up in Bridgeport in California. This time, story. It was, oh my god, it was hailing on us. At first, it was like raining nonstop, and then it just got so bad. I was like, remember those times? We brought different memories to bring up some good times that also went with the bad times, and we reminded of that stuff, and it gets them in a better mindset. It gets them thinking afterwards. It doesn't have to just be all about the grief, what they're going through. It's always good to get them off the mindset. It's one of the things I used.
Yeah, I can recall many a time in which I was exceptionally internal in the field,
Oh yeah.
and that was God, it brings back memories. But yeah, that's some of the methods that I would use even when I was in the Marine Corps, was just distractions. Because
Mhm.
sometimes, like I know a lot of people, including myself especially, I tend to overanalyze almost every
Mhm.
conceivable facet of my entire life. So when I think too much and I have too much time on my hands to think and be by myself, and I have that separation from social interaction, it becomes toxic and
Mhm.
internally. And I think too much and I dwell on things and I overthink and I rethink, and then I start to psych myself out. So
Yeah,
I
I've been there.
understand that.
Yeah.
Sometimes just writing helps. A method that I actually really liked to use for other people is when we would get back in garrison after we would try and get through the field op
Mhm.
together. I can recall one time when I was deployed in Australia, I remember talking to a friend of mine who was dealing with I think it was girlfriend that broke up with him,
Yeah.
and then his mother had passed away, and so he was just getting hammered with a lot.
Mhm.
And we had about 2 months left over there, and he's like, I really need to talk to you, man. I need to talk to somebody. So I said, okay. Like, what do you need to talk to me about? I had no idea of the situation prior to that conversation.
Mhm.
So he said, I don't know, man. I just want to rant. And I'm like, okay, cool. You know what? How about I sit you down, lie you down, close your eyes, and just start spewing. Just start talking. It could be about anything. It could be about your day, what you ate, because subconsciously, sometimes it helps. It's actually a psychology method that some psychologists and therapists use. I forget the actual name for it, the actual title of this method, but just getting somebody to spew and start talking sometimes can lead them to deeper emotional connections, It can bring about really repressed subconscious things that they didn't talk about with a lot of people for years on end. Sometimes that helps. Or sometimes it helps to write things down in a journal and then rip out that page and burn it so nobody else sees it. Just use any type of method that you can. And I think the bottom line is just, like you said, distraction, getting their mindset into a different place, a more positive place. And then it'll inevitably lead them to, I would say, a more clear thought process. Because time away can sometimes give you time to reflect, not necessarily dwell on it and think that that's all you think about, but just giving your brain a break. Sometimes is one of the healthiest things that you can do for yourself.
Yeah,
but I appreciate your indomitable spirit, Garrett. It's contagious.
Yeah, thank you. And it's at the end of the day, it really is person to person. But the more moral of the story is that we try to connect with that on that individual basis. No method usually always works for the same person. It's always based on how they feel and how you make them comfortable and willing to talk. And the main thing that we want to make people understand is that just being there for somebody, showing vulnerability, building that trust, none of those are bad things, and it's all a good thing. It's all part of the healing process that I've learned to deal with. I've gone through a bunch of self-loathing. I've gone through a bunch of stuff in my time because I overanalyze. It's just good to be able to talk and show that vulnerability once in a while to somebody who actually gets it, or somebody who has a fresher perspective, or just wants to be there.
Yeah, outside perspective is one of the most undervalued things when it comes to social interaction, and actually utilizing their perspective and actually taking their advice to heart. There was always a saying, it's like no advice is bad advice because you choose whether or not to take it. So, I mean, it's entirely dependent on the person. And I agree with you that you have to take it on a person by person basis, which is why I decided to interview you. Because again, just getting more perspectives on things who have been through different lifestyles and different mindsets and have different ideologies and philosophies on how to handle stressors in their lives, it can open your eyes to different methods that you probably didn't consider before. Which is why this is the entire reason that we're having this discussion. It's the entire reason why Tom has asked me to go from person to person and interview them, is to get different perspectives. And that's really all we can ask of others, is to just share their mindsets.
And that's a good thing. And I'm really glad that, given the age that we're all in, the technology, it allows us to connect to more people and have people see. So I think this is a very, very good tool to utilize. And, it has my full support and backing of it. It's really nice. And I'm really glad to see you taking the passion as well as the time to do something like this. So it's really awesome.
Well, Garrett, I appreciate your articulations on all this. And thank you again for joining me.
Anytime. Happy to be here. Thank you.